Scott Fraser for this wonderful space and this wonderful evening. This is the last place Arthur was teaching, and so it's very fitting that we have this in this wonderful place. Also, Kelly, who's did the slideshow in the back, Callie, who's doing the sound and the streaming, Robin Bova, who's helping with the iPad of Arthur's selections before and after. And if I forgot anybody, please, Susan Larson for the program, and Whitney, of course. I met Arthur through Sherry Peacock. He and I became fast friends over a few things. His incredible knowledge of music, especially ballet and opera. Second, my familiarity with the Manhattan pre-AIDS gay culture, having been around that crowd as a young, aspiring Philadelphia organist. And third, arising from my love of both rowing and music, the idea of combining athleticism with music became a completely obvious fascination for me with respect to classical ballet. I always saw that my inspiration to leave tax law at Arthur Anderson and go back to school at Boston Conservatory for my master's in music was my father's death when I was 26, but I think knowing Arthur also had a great influence. And then AIDS hit soon after, and we all group hugged through the crisis along with Elaine Bauer and some others, especially regarding the agonizing death of my inspiration to play piano for ballet, our dear mutual friend Stephen Davis, both dancer, organist, and ballet accompanist who came from Atlanta to live out his final years. Arthur was there and more present than any of us through it. Arthur told many stories about his days of dancing. I'm sure many here know them. One of my favorites was when he was on a Boston Ballet tour with Nureyev in Italy. He was involved in a massive food fight. Do any of you know this story? I think in a tent, it was a large tent where they were eating, and then it seems Nureyev started it. Arthur had various stories about Nureyev, but long and short of it, Rudy was a pill, to put it charitably. I wish I could remember all of Arthur's stories about it. Sue Larson reminded me Arthur actually started out as a music major at Butler University in Indiana, of which he spoke fondly. He enrolled in ballet to satisfy his phys ed requirements at the late age of 18 or so, and the rest is history. He had a great knowledge and fascination of ballet history and ballet music history, and it later became the ballet music history, part of which we conferred a great deal, being no small part of the success of the ballet orchestrations and recordings we've done in collaboration with our mutual longtime friend Anna Marie Holmes. Quite ironically, I was visiting Anna Marie Holmes in Richmond, Virginia, when on the morning of Wednesday, November 15th, Michael texted me 3 words: Arthur is gone. I knew Arthur throughout his various residences in Fort Hill. I think I had something to do with that. Then Jamaica, playing with Michael, and on to the great northern estate that looms above Saltonstall Pond. We were also happy for Arthur when Michael came along. The love of my life, Francisca, and I were so happy to have Arthur and Michael be able to attend our wedding, which was just 5 short years ago. Michael and I shared the common connection with his native North End, especially during the period when I was music director at the North End Italian churches, serving many of the people Michael had known from his childhood. Arthur had 3 epic traits for me: being above the fray, loyalty, and an encyclopedic knowledge. Being above the fray, the most outstanding quality that always struck me about Arthur Leeth was that he had this exquisite way of not descending into gossip and the Sturm und Drang, an iron-fisted loyalty that always came in velvet, elbow-length ball gown white gloves. Sherry had a dancer friend who later went to ABT, Danny Chait. I think some of you probably remember him. I'm sure some of you knew him. Danny had a historical way of summing up and imitating Arthur Leeth. Danny would say with a certain up-rolled look in his eyes, "I am over everything. I am over it all." To me, it was a perfect encapsulation of the wonderful aura Arthur projected. Or another way to put it, these are the facts, ma'am. Take it or leave it. I don't really care. But of course, we all know he did care. He cared a great, great deal. The second trait, loyalty, which very much dovetails with the first. Arthur's gentle yet fierce loyalty to his friends. How can you be in the ballet world without gossip, supporters, and detractors? When friends of Arthur's were under fire, he was nothing but positive and loyal. He refused to even indulge in the negative, whether the negative was true or not, because they were his friends. From what I saw, he had a skillful way of just bypassing bumps in the road his friends may have had. No apologies, which is to say he wouldn't get into the dirty facts defending someone on an issue. He would just blithely move past it and on to the next subject, yet without a whiff of being political or duplicitous. Pretty tough in today's world. This included Boston Ballet. Until the day he left, he was unwaveringly loyal to Boston Ballet, never spoke an ill word of them, and never indulged when Boston Ballet hit a hard publicity patch. He did the same with his friends. But with Arthur, there was this fascinating other side. He was non-judgmental to a fault. I also noticed he cared about people, about the persons inside of people. He very rarely said someone conducted an orchestra well, or danced well, or sang well, or played well. Sometimes, but more often, he would say in some set of words that the person was doing well. Arthur did a stint in a Trappist monastery, I'm not sure how many people know this, to discern if he had a vocation as a monk. And it struck me he really seemed to take to heart the second letter of Timothy from the Bible. Stay away from foolish, useless talk, because that will lead people further away from God. Their evil teaching will spread like a sickness inside the body. We're all glad he didn't stay in the monastery, a loss for the Trappists. Arthur had a gift for the world at the time that he was yet to give. And finally, the final trait, Arthur's encyclopedic knowledge of opera and ballet. Just a few examples of things we mused over. The Esmeralda Pallada does not come from the Esmeralda Ballet. Maybe one variation does, but it was created in Soviet times by Gusev. The Balanchine Serenade for Strings was very probably a ripoff of Lupokov, Balanchine's early influence in a ballet called The Magnificence of the Universe. That indeed Virginia Williams didn't really found Boston Ballet, but rebooted the pre-existent Boston Ballet of the 30s, 40s, and 50s as a Balanchine spin-off. That the Mariinsky version of Swan Lake that most people use today, with all its interpolations, cuts, and repositionings, was done within months of Tchaikovsky breathing his last breath. That Arthur's idol, the greatest opera singer of all time, Maria Callas, was actually a Greek-American girl from New York. And finally, that Ima Sumac, another one of our mutual favorites, was truly a Peruvian-born singer, not, as falsely rumored, a Brooklyn housewife named Amy Camos. We are very close in this sanctuary tonight to where Arthur sang many rehearsals with the Harvard Radcliffe Chorus and Jameson Marvin, another one of his great passions. He loved singing in the baritone favorites of the great oratorios, Messiah, Elijah, Stabat Maters, Bach's Mass in B minor, and the Requiems. Finally, in looking around at this incredible wealth of artistic talent in this room that has come out for Arthur, it reminds me of an inscription on the tomb of the great British architect Sir Christopher Wren of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. There on the floor is an inscription that Arthur knew well and that he and I mused about, all the more appropriate for the Jose and Mateo Sanctuary Studio, the place where Arthur last taught. Subdus conditor huis ecclesiae et urbis conditor Christophorus Wren, qui vixit annos ultra non anginta, non sibis et bono publico lector si monumentum requiris circumspice. Here in its foundations lies the architect of this church and city, Christopher Wren, who lived beyond 90 years, not for his own profit, but for public good. Reader, if you seek his monument, look around you, paraphrasing for our beloved friend. Here, in these foundations, dwells the spirit of the architect of this artistic community, Sir Arthur Leeth, who lived too few years, not for his own profit, not for the public good. Reader, if you seek his monument, look around you.
We've been practicing the breathing at the house. Okay. As you all know, he was extraordinary. He had so many passions, and he was a true maestro in the world of ballet, such a dedicated teacher. And as we've all read over the past few weeks from all the tributes, he was just such an inspiration to all of those who were blessed to have known him. He shared his knowledge and love for his art with honesty, passion, and elegance. And I think because of that, he became a mentor to so many of you. And in turn, you became family to him. And on behalf of my family, I want to thank you for that, for his friends, his colleagues, for you, Mike, for being his family too. His love for his family was unwavering. Each of us gathered here today, I think will carry a piece of that love with us forever, and I'd like to share just a few pieces of that that are special to my family and I. To my sister Erica, my brother Sean and I, he was our Santa Claus growing up, so he drank the milk, he ate the cookies. He made sure that Santa never forgot anything for us. He just made the most magical times of our lives just more magical, and I think he did that for a lot of people. To my father, he was a big brother, and I think that they would both agree. I think those of us who know him those of us that know both of them would agree that there's never been two brothers that had such a different interest. So one went on with his life to be a professional athlete in sport, and one a professional in dance. But if you really talk to those of us and ask some questions, you'd find that they're really more alike than I think either of them ever knew. The same person with just different interests. To me, he lived a life that was so different from the world that I knew growing up. He showed me how to walk through life with courage, to be my true self, and to not worry or to surrender to the expectations that society puts on us. I loved him for that, and I hope he knew that. I will always remember my uncle, but I will especially remember him every Christmas when I write that same letter to my nieces and my nephews that he wrote to me, and when I attend one of their ballet recitals, and when I hear the dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies or the first note of a bagpipe. I think as we all remember him today, I hope we can all celebrate him and his wonderful life, because it simply was wonderful. So, thank you.
Oops, I got my mask and my earring. Sorry, folks. My name is Beatrice Safran, and I am the music director of Philadelphia Ballet. About 22 years ago, our company made plans to create its first full-length production of Swan Lake. I purchased the score and very quickly realized that I was deep, deep in the weeds. No filmed version of Swan Lake matched the printed music in my hands, and I needed help. Thank goodness, Arthur was recommended to me as a generous, all-knowing genie of ballet. From the moment we met, I knew I wanted to be his friend. How incredibly lucky I was, much later on, to share an office with Arthur for 2 years. The idea of love at first sight originates from Greek and Roman literature. This notion is usually illustrated with images of Eros or Cupid shooting arrows downward into the hearts of their hapless victims. But friendship at first sight just isn't part of our vernacular. Judging from the tributes to Arthur on social media and judging from the crowd assembled here, this instant and deep feeling of friendship is an arrow that shot into the hearts of many, many of us when it came to our dear friend. Arthur and I shared many passions. We talked a lot about opera. He quickly, however, spotted a big gap in my knowledge of the countertenor repertoire and took it upon himself to lead me through a thorough exploration of that corner of musical literature. Every time I walked into the office, I was greeted by the voice of another countertenor singing away on the CD player. Arthur and I shared a love of classic Hollywood, and we would volley our favorite lines back and forth across the room. And of course, we shared a love of ballet. There are certain titles that I will always hear with Arthur's dry delivery. Coppelia, Schleppin' Booty, and my favorite, Snap, Clap, Wave, and Flap, otherwise known as Don Quixote. I have never laughed so much at work, and I am sure I never will again. But Arthur and I also got things done. We pored over ballet scores and editions, sleuthed out obscure music, and navigated the vicissitudes of the music publishing world together. Fortunately for me, our friendship flourished well beyond our days in the office, as did the humor and the laughs. Since November 14th, I've been searching for a word or expression to describe the instant and deep loving friendship I felt for Arthur. And while I haven't found one, I really don't think one exists in English, but please someone prove me wrong. I've discovered that C.S. Lewis captured this phenomenon in his autobiography entitled Surprised by Joy, which is a great title. Please believe me when I tell you that I have changed not even one word of Lewis's writing. I've only shortened the excerpt a little bit. So here goes. Many chapters ago, I mentioned a boy who lived near us. His name was Arthur. And he was my brother's exact contemporary. I think it was shortly before the beginning of my last term at Wyvern that I received a message saying that Arthur was in bed, convalescent, and would welcome a visit. I can't remember what led me to accept this invitation, but for some reason I did. I found Arthur sitting up in bed. On the table beside him lay a copy of Myths of the Norsemen. "Do you like that?" said I. "Do you like that?" said he. Next moment, the book was in our hands. Our heads were bent close together. We were pointing, quoting, talking, soon almost shouting, discovering in a torrent of questions that we liked not only the same thing, but the same parts of it and in the same way. That both knew the stab of joy, joy with a capital J, and that for both the arrow was shot from the north. Many thousands of people have had the experience of finding the first friend, and it is none the less a wonder, as great a wonder as first love, or even greater. I had been so far from thinking such a friend possible that I had never even longed for one, no more than I longed to be King of England. All of us were blessed to have been shot through the heart while standing near our beloved Arthur. Thank you.
I'm glad to see that I don't have to ask for the microphone to be lower. Anyone of my stature who danced with Arthur knew that you had to ask him to hold the hand a little lower. Can I get this up? You gotta lower it. Arthur. Lower. A is for Arthur. A. It also connotes excellence, which Arthur produced in great quantities. He was artistic in dance, in his music. I was fortunate enough to hear him play his harp once, because he only did it for himself, I understand. But that was his way of inquiring and acquiring more musical knowledge. He was an archivist. He rescued many items from the lower cell on 19 Clarendon Street, things that people might want to have. I was the lucky recipient because Arthur saw Virginia Williams' bookcase cabinets out in the dumpster, and he said, "Do you want them?" And I said, "Yes." And don't you know, Arthur helped me get them loaded into the truck. But most of all, he was authentic. He was authentic in his words. He was very careful with his words. When we had, Elaine Bauer and David Brown would have an orphan's Thanksgiving dinner. Lower. And Arthur, bless his heart, came over and said, "Okay, it's time to polish all your silver." He loved polishing silver. So in honor of his love of polishing silver, I polished mine today. Arthur, R, reliable. You could always count on Arthur to be where he said he was going to be and do what he was doing. And he was resilient many times over. I'll leave it at that. He was a researcher. He helped Bruce Wells locate music for his many choreographic endeavors, and he helped me get a composer to do my first long ballet for Boston Ballet 2. T, he was a tutor of many things. He was a teacher, a mentor, and best of all, he was trustworthy. What Arthur said, he meant. H, he was humorous in his only wry wit and wisdom way. And then you could have a good chuckle with him. He was hopeful. The last time I saw Arthur, he was very hopeful that this was going to work. It's the most in-depth discussion on a personal level that I had with Arthur outside of our domain, the ballet. And I'm so thankful to Michael and Sue Larson for that afternoon. It was remarkable. You, unflappable. The man could come through anything and still have a smile or a growl. But he was unflappable. You couldn't get his dander up. He was the ultimate character actor. He married me so many times to different partners. I can't count them all. He was also a monster. When we did our first Swan Lake, the designer was in the room and he was in his owl suit for Swan Lake. And I didn't realize that the designer was sitting at the front of the room. And I opened the door and unwittingly went in and said, "Oh, Arthur, you're so cute." And I ran up to him and Arthur just bent down, scooped me up, and said, "That's the designer." Well, it was cute. They had to make it a little more menacing later. He also won the very first Ezra Award. I have to explain Ezra. When Virginia Williams decided that A, you'd done something she didn't like, or you weren't working up to speed, she would call you Ezra. Ezra, come here. So we developed this Ezra Award in honor of Arthur. He received the very first Ezra Award as the Golden Goddess in Minoan dances. He had to stand on this pedestal.
I was dumbfounded. I pointed out all the huge things he did for me and my mother and all the dancers and his friends. And he just nodded, okay. That was it. Our older neighbor subscribes to newspapers. Eric met him today. Plopped at the end of his driveway. For some reason, they just plop him at the end of his driveway, expect this 95-year-old guy to come and get them in the pouring rain. Rain or shine, in his sleep clothes, Arthur chose to head out and place those papers on Richard's porch. Spiders, ants, and bats. You know we have had bats. Always found their way to safety on whatever magazine or cup was at hand. As was his quiet counsel, as we see here, to a lot of dancers. Living was a team effort for Arthur, and I saw that firsthand. He loved sharing his knowledge, as you all know. and little acts of kindness fulfilled him in ways he didn't fully understand. He chose to do these things because it was part of this huge circle, like his brother and his nieces. They're the same. He chose to do these things because it was part of this one huge circle. He did the best and secretly expected the same from everybody, and crushed when the similar efforts were not mirrored. We remember similar phrases to this. Just grit your teeth and smile. Thanks for all who supported us. Thank you for the calls, notes, dinners, flowers, for being our friends. Thank you to my brother-in-law, Eric, and my wonderful nieces, Sasha and Erica, for making the journey, and everybody else. And the rest of the family, Linda and Greston, and the great nieces and nephews. Thank you to the team at Tufts. And thanks to all of you who made this celebration. You know who you are. I know who you are. All these families are miraculously connected through one remarkable life, which I was privileged to share. Remember, we choose to love, even if you have to pretend to like the lavender. Thank you, everybody.